Cunning.
Littlefinger.
Scheming.
Tormund.
Horny.
Small council.
United.
Arson.
Successful.
Sansa has escaped Winterfell. She won't be safe with the Boltons after her.
I risked everything for you, and you betrayed me.
I'm sorry.
Stop saying that.
Marjorie will repent her sins before the city.
That cannot happen.
I agree.
When does she return?
Soon.
The Temple of the Dosh Kalin. That's where they'll have taken her.
Welcome to Fan vs. Fan for Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 4. I'm Joel Minty.
I'm Brian Crosby.
And we're here to guide you through this episode, talk about what made it great, what made it slightly not as great, and all the amazing things that happened in this episode.
Joel, I really like that episode.
Yes.
I feel like we're going to have more pros than cons.
Yes.
So let's get going. What did you like?
One of the main things I liked was we actually got somewhere over in Essos. So all the plot with Dany has been going pretty slowly for a little while. It's been a while since she flew off on Drogon. That scene was really exciting. And since then, it's like, okay, we're back with the Khalasar. I'm fine with that, but it is kind of slow going. We were complaining last time that we're not really interested in the politics of the Dothraki, like these other Dothraki tribes.
Yeah, it also felt like she spent a long time like on horses, or maybe Oral just like sitting and waiting for her fate to be determined. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah,
like, let's get to the determining of the fate.
Yeah, and that's what happened this episode. And so normally we get about 6, 8, 10 minutes of Dany time, or whoever is in Essos time, kind of thrown in. And this episode we got 20 to 25. I don't know. There was a lot more time, and it made me care more.
And we went and came back, right?
Yeah, they went. They went.
Which
Came
I always
back
appreciate
for the climax.
Yeah,
but they had like multiple scenes in a row that all took place in Essos, and multiple ones just involving Tyrion and his like little cadre of people in Marine. So what I liked about that was it made me much more invested in that storyline than I have been yet this episode. So you can't always be tossing scraps to a plot line that is important and very separate from what else is going on, especially when the wall is getting so much attention so far. You can't always just toss scraps. Sometimes you have to flip it and have no scenes with certain characters and have a lot with others.
Yeah, and my complaint maybe 2 episodes back was I felt like we were missing the Game of Thrones, and I felt like we got a lot of that this episode. I thought the Tyrion scene was great, and that was that idea being illustrated. It's like, well, we've got to negotiate. We're almost getting a little like Star Trek TNG in here. Like we don't have to kill everybody every episode. We can sit down with a couple of the aliens and talk about who's going to sign what trade agreement. Yeah. And I'm into that sort of stuff, so I like it.
Well, but what you like is that it creates fractions within...
Factions?
Factions.
Right, fractions.
And fractions.
Sure.
Because like a quarter of them, an eighth of them might agree and create fractions.
Friction?
And fractures
right.
within their power.
Okay.
So what happens with Grey Worm and Missandei is they're not too happy with this new scheme. Right? And Tyrion's not particularly down with telling people because he doesn't trust them to keep up. Right up here. And so now you've got a little bit of friction going on there, which is really good because otherwise...
Faction friction.
You've got faction friction going on. And it's causing trouble. And what I like about that is before, they've all just basically been one voice where they stand around and support Dany.
Right.
More or less.
Well, I think I'm going to disagree a little bit with your fictional faction friction. That I didn't feel like Tyrion didn't think they were smart enough. I really felt like when he was looking to them to respond. I think that's the moment that we're talking about, right? Where the guys, the other dudes, the former slaves or whoever they were, were like, Grey Worm, do you agree with this? Missandei, do you agree with this? And Tyrion looks back at them like, what are you going to say? Well, right? I felt like the face that he was showing them was like, sort of like, I'm right. I'm right. You know this has to be done.
But part of it could also be a little bit of that Lannister, well, now I've put you in the spot where you have to go one way or the other. But
they had to go that way because I think they saw that he was onto something.
I'm not so sure. I think the scene after had Grey Worm kind of turning him around and poking him in the chest saying, you don't know them. I know them.
Yes.
And you think you got it all figured out, but you don't. And he might be right. So what did you like about the episode?
Well, when picking the pros and cons, it's always a little bit challenging. Like, do you pick a scene that you liked, or do you pick something like, the entire development of
half an hour of the show?
Yeah, and I feel like for me, oftentimes it's just a scene. Like, they just nail a scene, and that gets so many great ideas out. And I love that Sansa Jon scene.
Yeah,
it was probably one of the first times, at least in a long time, where we saw people just sort of chill out for a little while. It was a little sitcom-y, or it was a little, it was familial, as it, isn't supposed to be. That they were comfortable with each other, and they joked around, and they smiled. When is the last time Sansa Stark smiled? How many seasons has it been since anything good has happened?
Well, and you can imagine that this is one of the only things that's actually going to perk people up. Like, they don't get much good news on this show. And by this point, it should have been vaguely known, at least to... the news travels, I guess, around. So there has not been good news certainly coming up to Jon at the Wall, right? It's like, well, your dad's dead.
Yeah.
Well, your sisters are missing.
Yeah.
Well, we saw Bran, and we sent him north of the Wall. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, well, your home has been burned. Well, your mother and your other brother are now dead. Right? Like, this is literally the laundry list of ravens. Like, if I was Jon, I'd just be like, I don't want to hear these ravens today.
Kill all the ravens.
Yeah, send a fucking dove. Like, when one of those shows up with something being like, we found your dog, or like, he has his, but something cheery and chipper like that, right? Your sister is doing great. She's married to someone friendly.
She got a job in the city.
Yeah, exactly.
She works at a coffee shop now. She loves it.
Yeah, Arya's not a person anymore. It doesn't have the same ring to it.
Like, she's alive, but her state of personhood has been detached from her body. However that's been achieved, we don't know, but she's done it somehow.
Imagine getting that in a letter. Right?
Like, what does this even mean?
It's like, your sister is now no longer a person.
Legally.
They keep sending me these damn riddles. I don't know what to do.
But like, the dolphins are people now, but not my sister?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Cons! What were your cons?
There's so much that I liked about it. It was actually hard for me to come up with something that I could turn into a con. But if I have to say something, and we do, because we have the section, and that's what it's for, I would say that the Dario Jorah stuff leading into the campfire scene was like technically unnecessary. Not that it wasn't fun. Not that those guys aren't like a fun like traveling hobo buddy crime solving duo. And the crushing the guy's body. It's like lots of fun moments in it. But then when they find her, they find her, it's like, we have to get you out of here. And it's like, well, we can't leave. We'll never get out of here. He's like, I have a plan. Yeah. The plan doesn't even involve them. The plan she could have thought up at any time, probably. All they really needed them for was to bar the door. And if she'd just been more accurate with that fire in the first place, they wouldn't have had to bar the door at all.
It definitely did seem like they're like, man, we got to fit in some time with these guys before they're not alone anymore.
Right.
But
you're right. Like, they have their own narrative going of what their relationship is like,
and it's like, we got to fit a little bit more of that in.
I get it.
I was fine with the head crushing. It
was all fun,
reminiscent of the mountains head crushing, and so the more head crushing, the merrier. But it reminds me too of last season where you had Bronn and Sir Jaime, and they're doing their like two swords gallivanting about, right? And this is kind of like this season's two swords, and it came to a faster and happier conclusion than the Doran plot from last season. The ending was fun. I thought the bonfire's cool. There's a lot of stuff from Dany's plot that really harkens back to season 1. Yeah. Right? It's really like they did a micro season 1, right? Where it's like, okay, so she's in the wood, or she's off in the Dothraki Sea. She's picked up by the Cal. They don't really trust her. She doesn't have that much power. They take her to this place where there's all these people, and now we're going to see what she's made of. And there's a bonfire, and she walks out of it, and she lives, and they all bow to her. And it was like season 1 in a nutshell. Yeah. Summed up very quickly to kind of get back to civilization, I imagine. So one other thing about the ending that drove me nuts, just a little, right, where she walks out, and she is standing, like, in the doorway. Yeah. Like, she is directly under, like, the apex of the entry to this place. And everyone in front of her is just like, oh my God, this beautiful naked woman just walked out of the fire. Oh, like, I'm going to bow and pray. And then, like, everyone kind of around the outside starts doing it too.
Like a human wave.
Like, kind of like the wave at a baseball game. But, like, the people at the back,
I have no idea.
They don't know what they're looking at. They're like, oh, those people are bowing to something. We should. Everyone else is doing it. Get down, David. Come on.
There's probably been a lot of incidents in the past where a Cal walks out of a building and somebody bows, and some guy at the back is like, I don't know what's going on, and he gets an arrow through the face. Yeah. So now they just bow. If there's bowing, you bow. Joel, is there anything bad in this episode?
I was so happy with this episode. And one thing, just even quickly, before I get to my con, the thing I liked about it is that I don't need major things happening every episode.
Are you describing another pro?
Yeah, but it's a lead-in to my con.
Okay. All right.
So, like, I don't need major things happening all the time. That's not what made season 1 and 2 great. Like, things happen slowly. Yeah. Sometimes. Mm-hmm. That's okay. What matters is that they're not scenes that make you wince. And that they're not doing things that are really out of character or are throwing things for a huge loop or sand snaking it up. Right? That's what matters. Okay? And so an episode that has a lot of smaller scenes, moments where people are staring each other down, where they're talking, where they're developing just character even on characters we've known for a long time, I really like episodes like that. So what happens is when you have an episode like that where you're pretty happy with every scene except for some of the silliness at the end, the only cons that I end up with become these little nitpicky things, like you said, talking about episodes, that little things that drive you nuts. And so for me, it's this idea that last episode, Theon is like, I'm not worthy. You have a real knight now. I must go to the Iron Islands. And he is wearing, like, shaggy rags.
Yes.
Like, it's vague whether he has footwear. He is crumbled as a human being. Mm-hmm. He apologizes to trees for brushing them. Uh-huh. And yet he is let loose into the wild on his own. And as far as we know, if you look at the map, the North is like the biggest motherfucker out there. Like, it is the biggest.
It's substantial.
It is a substantial place. You're not crossing that in like half a day. Right?
And it's the winter.
And it's like
snow.
It's snowy.
It's cold. He's got to cross a sea.
He's got to cross a long. And so, like, I don't mind if he gets to the coast. There's Greyjoy fisher villages, and he catches a boat. Mm-hmm. But like, that is like weeks of walking on his own. And this guy probably couldn't skin a rabbit without like clutching his head and collapsing to the dirt. I know he's getting some of his strength back. He held a sword and things like that. But like on his own and like out in the snow, his story should have ended with him like freezing to death in a hovel, and they're all like, so whatever happened to Theon at the end of the show? And everyone's like, he probably got what he deserved.
Yeah.
So Brian, where do you think the show is going from here?
Well, I think this episode pointed to a pretty interesting future. We were talking earlier that there were a lot of frenemies created.
Frenemies!
In this episode. There were groups of people that aren't normally on the same side, or haven't previously been on the same side, at least willingly, and now are.
Right.
For example, we had the Cersei and the Tyrells and the small council sort of come together.
United.
Yes, like they have a common enemy.
Yeah.
That's not the guy sitting next to me.
But what I like about that is they're like, we have to defeat them so we can go back to hating each other.
Yeah, it was pretty like explicitly stated.
It was.
Yeah.
But that's what I like. They're like, if we're not explicitly stating it, it's never going to work.
That's right.
Right? So it's like, in order to be
we got to be honest about this.
We have to be honest
alliance.
about how much we hate each other.
That's right.
And then another group of that would be Tyrion making peace with the slavers.
I would love that. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And we already talked about it, but I mean, they directly ask, Grey Worm and Sunday, who were sort of originally on the other side. Like Grey Worm was originally a slave.
And so is now Sunday.
Yeah, and now they're like, well, this might need to be done. You don't make peace with your friends, as they said. You only make peace with your enemies.
As they say multiple times. And yeah, it's a common kind of thing. It creates a lot of good tension because you have common goals that you never know who's going to back out first. And that's what Grey Worm was getting to.
Yeah,
the Tyrell. The Queen of Thorns, Olenna, the old lady, and Cersei are both thinking the same thing about what happens as soon as High Sparrow is gone. What they have to do to be the ones to seize power, right? Marjorie's the queen, Tommen's the king. They both have armies. They both don't like each other.
Yeah.
We've got more. Dario and Jorah have been together for a while, and we clearly see that they still have issue with each other.
Sure.
Right? They've been frenemies for a bit.
They seem to become buddy-buddy towards the end.
And
now in a weird way, I think this is where it's pointing to, is that like now they're on the Dothraki side.
Yeah.
Right? Like now she's the queen of the Dothraki again. Like when we see those guys again, they're going to be hanging out in Dothraki camp. Mm-hmm. Right? It doesn't mean that they're friends, but it means that like they're people who you wouldn't expect to be on the same side who now are.
The other group would be the interesting scene with Davos, Melisandre, and Brienne of Tarth, where she comes out and tells Davos that she slayed his liege lord.
That's right.
And then explains about what happened to his beloved Stannis' beloved daughter, who beloved to Davos, not to Stannis, but beloved to Davos, right? So it gets a whole powder keg potentially there, although I'm not sure they're going to go that route, because they all have to work together to kill the best.
Yeah, well, nothing happens in that scene.
Not
like,
really.
in an interesting way. That she comes out and says, honestly, again,
Very-
it's like,
very Brienne.
this is what happened.
Yeah.
Nobody pulled a sword. Nobody threw a punch.
No.
Nobody demon magicked another person. They just like, we're on the same side.
This is rational person talking to rational person,
Yep.
plus Melisandre's there.
I guess we're stuck together.
So, like, Davos is not about to make any kind of rash decisions, right?
Right.
He understands these things. And of course, it also draws in the history. I think the show should bring up any time, which can pull back to all the episodes they have before it. They do so much foreshadowing. So she mentions the time when she last saw Sir Davos, and it was in episode like 203 or 204 when Renly and Stannis meet
Long time ago.
to agree that they're not going to be friends and turn around and leave. And so it's great to see stuff that was really important in seasons 2 and 3 and 1 always coming back still,
Yes.
even though we're beyond the books and the clever crafting of somebody who spent many years writing the books. We're now on to the yearly crafting of 2 showrunners, and they can still tie in the past. That's all the time we have this week for Fan vs. Fan Game of Thrones, Season 6, Episode 4. I'm Joel Minty.
I'm Brian Crosby.
If you like what you see, all of the fun hijinks that Brian and I get into here at the Awesome Table, what you can do is you can subscribe to the YouTube channel right here.
Oh, and if you like Twitter, you can follow us along at Dorkshelf. Click here.
Definitely check it out. It's lots of fun. We will see you next week for Episode 5.
Kicked him out!